Deep in the Colombian Andes, beneath the surface of a circular lake, lies a fortune in gold that has outlasted every empire, every army, and every man who ever dared to go looking for it. A man covered head to toe in gold dust stands on a reed raft, about to step into a lake, and this is not a myth, it is a documented ceremony that actually happened. Long before Spain ever crossed the Atlantic, the Muisca people of the high Colombian Andes performed a sacred ritual at a lake called Guatavita. When a new chief rose to power, his priests would coat his entire body in sticky resin, then blow gold dust through hollow canes until he shimmered like a walking sun. He was placed at the center of a raft alongside priests and nobles, surrounded by piles of gold figurines and emerald offerings. As the raft reached the center of the lake, sitting more than 3,000 meters above sea level, cold enough to steal your breath, the chief dove in, washing the gold from his skin, while every treasure on the raft was cast into the black water below. The people watching from the shore fell silent as the gold vanished, and then they erupted in song. This was never greed, it was prayer. But here is what the Spanish did not understand when they first heard this story. The ceremony had been happening for generations, and the lake had been receiving gold for centuries before any European eye ever saw it. Lake Guatavita is almost perfectly circular, just over 300 meters across, and scientists still debate how it was formed. Nestled in the eastern Andes of Colombia, about 57 kilometers northeast of modern Bogotá, Lake Guatavita sits at an altitude where the air is thin and the water is ink-dark. Its near-perfect circular shape has led some researchers to propose it formed from a meteorite impact thousands of years ago, though others argue it is a collapsed salt dome or karst sinkhole. The geological debate continues. What is not debated is that the Muisca considered this lake the navel of the world, a direct channel to the gods beneath the earth. On clear mornings, the lake reflects the sky so completely that you cannot tell where the water ends and the clouds begin. The Muisca did not throw their gold into just any lake, they chose the most otherworldly, most unreachable place they could find, and it kept their treasure safe for 500 years. The gold at the bottom was not from a single ceremony, it was from dozens, possibly hundreds, accumulated across generation after generation, and the true scale of what was given to that water should change how you think about what lies down there. The Muisca threw gold into Guatavita not once, not 10 times, but across at least 3 centuries of recorded ceremony, and likely far longer than that. Spanish chroniclers who interviewed Muisca survivors in the 1530s recorded that the El Dorado ceremony was already ancient when their grandparents were children. Each new chieftain performed the rite, and each ceremony deposited another layer of gold and emeralds into the sediment at the bottom of the lake. The Muisca were among the most accomplished goldsmiths in the pre-Columbian Americas, producing an alloy of gold and copper called tumbaga, which they hammered and cast into ritual figurines known as tunjos, offerings that archaeologists still recover from lakes and bogs across the Cundinamarca Plateau today. By the time the Spanish arrived in the 1530s, the floor of Guatavita was, by any honest estimate, carpeted in centuries of devotion. Every piece of gold down there was never intended as wealth, it was meant to be a gift, freely given and permanently gone, which is precisely why no one who came to take it back ever seemed to prosper. Word of this ceremony reached Spanish ears in a form they instantly recognized, treasure, and what happened next set off one of the most catastrophic treasure hunts in the history of the world. The Spanish did not call it Lake Guatavita, they called the Golden Man El Dorado, the Gilded One, and by the time the story reached Seville, it had grown into an entire city built from gold. Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada, a Spanish lawyer turned conquistador, reached the Muisca highlands in 1537 and found a civilization rich in gold and salt. His soldiers seized real gold, significant gold, but the Muisca kept gesturing eastward, toward the Great Plains, toward more wealth, always just beyond the next ridge. This was a practiced survival strategy, redirect the invaders' hunger toward somewhere else, anywhere else. But it worked almost too well. By the 1540s, the story had mutated from a ritual about one man dusted in gold into a rumor about a sovereign city built entirely of it, a king who ate from golden plates and bathed in golden rivers, and once El Dorado escaped into the European imagination, it could never be disproven. The Muisca's act of pointing the Spanish further on may have protected the Muisca themselves, but it sentenced thousands of others across a continent to die in jungles and mountains chasing a city that never existed. No expedition would illustrate that tragedy more starkly than the one that departed from Quito in February 1541. Thousands of people marched into the jungle, and almost none of them ever came back. Gonzalo Pizarro left Quito in February 1541 with 220 Spanish soldiers and thousands of indigenous allies, and what staggered back 18 months later was barely recognizable as the same expedition. Pizarro, younger brother of the man who had toppled the Inca Empire, was certain that El Dorado lay east of the Andes in the lowland jungle. His force hacked through some of the densest forest on earth, following rivers that led nowhere, surviving on boiled leather belts and roasted insects. After months without finding gold, he sent his lieutenant Francisco de Orellana downriver on a small boat to find food and return, but the current of the Amazon made return impossible, and so Orellana accidentally became the first European to navigate the entire length of the Amazon River, arriving at the Atlantic coast in August 1542. Pizarro, meanwhile, staggered back into Quito with fewer than 80 Spanish survivors, his army of thousands reduced to living ghosts, having found no gold at all. El Dorado had destroyed its first great army without a single battle. The jungle, the current, and the hunger did all the work. The disaster did not stop the search. If anything, it sharpened it, because men who had already lost so much could not afford to believe that the gold was never there. When the jungle refused to surrender its secret, the Spanish turned back to the one place they knew the gold was real, and in 1545 Hernán Pérez de Quesada decided that if the gold was in the lake, the solution was simply to remove the lake. Hernán Pérez, brother of the man who had conquered the Muisca, organized a vast human chain of workers around the shores of Guatavita, carrying gourds and leather buckets, bailing water from a lake more than 30 meters deep. They worked for 3 months. The water level dropped by approximately 3 meters, a staggering effort achieved entirely by hand, and along the newly exposed shoreline, workers recovered gold artifacts. It was enough to confirm that far more lay deeper, but not nearly enough to satisfy what had driven the search. The moment they stopped bailing, the water crept silently back. They had proven the gold was real, and that made walking away feel absolutely impossible. But what Hernán Pérez achieved with gourds and buckets, a Bogotá merchant named Antonio de Sepúlveda would attempt with something far more dramatic, and far more dangerous. 35 years after the bucket chain failed, a Bogotá merchant named Antonio de Sepúlveda received a license from the Spanish crown to try something no one had attempted before, cutting a channel through the physical wall of the lake itself. In 1580 Sepúlveda mobilized a large workforce and began carving a massive notch into the rim of Guatavita at its lowest point, intending to drain the lake like a bath by slicing open its side. The plan worked, spectacularly at first. Water poured through the notch and the lake level dropped by as much as 20 meters, exposing a wide ring of dark lake bed around the shore. Workers scrambling down the wet slopes recovered gold objects and emeralds as the water retreated. Then, without warning, the waterlogged walls of the cut collapsed, killing workers in the landslide. Sepúlveda survived, but his fortune was gone, and he died in poverty. The notch he carved into the rim of Guatavita is still there today. You can stand at its edge, look down at that ancient scar in the earth, and feel exactly where a man's ambition met its limit. The lake has been protected by Colombian law since 1965 and cannot be excavated, but the story did not end there, because in 1969 a discovery in a cave far from the lake proved that the Golden Man had been real all along. In 1969 a group of men exploring a cave near the Colombian town of Pasca reached into a crack in the rock and pulled out a small ceramic container, and inside it was the single most important object in the entire El Dorado story. Inside the container was a golden raft, just under 20 centimeters long, crafted from tumbaga, the gold-copper alloy the Muisca had mastered, depicting a tall central figure surrounded by 10 smaller figures, all standing on a flat platform. It was unmistakably a miniature of the El Dorado ceremony, the chief on his raft, his priests arrayed around him, the offering suspended in the moment before it is made. The object had been placed in that cave centuries before any Spaniard landed in the Americas and had waited, undisturbed, through every expedition, every drainage, every collapse. It is now kept behind glass in the Museo del Oro, the Gold Museum, in Bogota, not because of its material worth, but because of what it confirms. The ceremony was real, the golden man was real, and the lake at the center of the story is exactly where the Muisca always said it was. Every conquistador, every merchant, every desperate man who died chasing a city of gold was chasing the shadow of something that was never a city. It was a prayer, given to a lake, and the lake held it safe all along. If this story changed the way you think about gold, history, and what we lose in the search for both, hit like, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe to Unearthed Facts, because there are secrets like this one waiting every single week. If this blew your mind, smash the like button. It helps more people discover these hidden stories. Share this with someone who loves history, and subscribe to Unearthed Facts so you never miss a secret.